Hi, today we're going to tackle an issue affecting many Neptune 3 and 4 Max printers, Z-banding. But how are we going to do that, you may ask? Well, by directly addressing one of its two leading causes, Z-wobble. Z-wobble is commonly caused by bent or misaligned lead screws. While the lead screws in your printer might look straight, there could be one or more slight bends, resulting in the tool head not following a perfectly straight up and down path. This is what can cause the characteristic bumps, lines, and unevenness, often referred to as Z-banding. While there are many different approaches for dealing with this, including the sliding nuts in your stock Neptune Max printer, many 3D printers avoid lead screw-based Z-wobble entirely by using belts to raise and lower the gantry. And that brings us to the mod for today's video, the brand new Belted Z mod from TBStron3D. This kit will allow us to replace the lead screws in our Neptune 3 and 4 Max printers with belts, and never again need to fight with bent or misaligned lead screws, or worry about how tight to make these lead screw nut screws. While we'll be modifying a Neptune 4 Max in this video, the kits for Neptune 3 Max printers are identical and the steps are virtually the same. The kit consists of 21 different items, including a 57 centimeter long axle, which will drive the main timing belts, two 57 centimeter long plastic extrusion inserts, which will hide and protect the motor wiring, two belt tensioners, four M4 by 16 millimeter long button head screws for securing the belt tensioners, and two motor mount brackets. A set of 8 M3 by 6 millimeter socket head screws are included for mounting the Z-axis motors, as well as two timing belt pulleys that fit on the axle and cause the timing belts to move. Two long spacers and two short spacers are installed on the axle and help position the timing belt pulleys. Two large timing belt pulleys and two small timing belt pulleys, along with two small timing belts, transfer the forces from the Z-axis motors to the axle. Two axle bearings and two axle bearing mounts are also included to provide additional support to the axle, while two motor extension cables are provided for extending the existing motor wiring. The kit also includes two main timing belts, along with some extra crimps in case repairs or adjustments are ever needed. Since the motor mount brackets do not have threaded holes for the back diagonal braces, two additional M4 by 16 millimeter button head screws and two nylon locking nuts are provided. Finally, a set of zip ties are included for securing the wiring. A handful of tools and supplies will be needed while installing the mod, including two 2.5 and 3 millimeter hex wrenches for tightening and loosening screws, and a pair of side cutters for cutting and trimming zip ties. A 7 millimeter socket is also required, and if you have the front diagonal brace mod already installed in your printer, an 8 millimeter socket. The small belt pulleys included in the kit occasionally have tiny burrs around the set screws, but these can be easily removed with a small round needle file. You will want a ruler for ensuring the axle is centered and a flashlight for verifying the T-nuts in the belt tensioners get installed properly. Two larger, equal height and stable objects will be required for holding up the gantry as we are working on the top of the printer. The lead screws and the axle bearings may be covered in grease, so paper towels might come in handy. Also, it can't hurt to have a few extra zip ties on hand. The Belted Z mod kit includes M4 by 16 millimeter screws for attaching the tops of the back diagonal braces, but I use M4 by 12 millimeter screws instead. While purely subjective, I think it looks a little cleaner. A 3D printed cable mount will be required for holding up the printer's main cable. There are many different options you can use, but in this video, we'll be installing the cable mount that I designed, link in the description, which uses three M3 by 6 millimeter socket head screws. Lastly, A pair of gantry alignment objects will be needed. I designed this set of two 3D printed blocks, but two equal-sized machinist squares or anything similar will also work. However, these printed blocks work great for supporting your gantry after the install as well, but more about that at the end of the video. For this video, when the steps refer to the left and right of the printer, they are with respect to the front of the printer. Installing the Z-axis dual synchronous belt kit. Step 1. Remove the front diagonal braces using a 3mm hex wrench and an 8mm socket. Only perform this step if your printer has the front diagonal brace kit installed. Step 2. Remove any filament from the printer. Step 3. Raise the gantry so that it is higher than your two gantry support objects. Step 4. Remove the PEI build surface so it doesn't get damaged. Step 5. Place the two gantry support objects on the print bed. Step 6. Lower the gantry until it is just barely touching the support objects. Ensure no force is being applied to the objects. Step 7. Turn off clipper using fluid or mainsail. Step 8. Turn off the printer. Step 9. Disconnect power. Step 10. Disconnect Ethernet. Step 11. Disconnect the main cable. Any cable clamps and holders will no longer be used. Step 12. Cut the zip tie securing the filament runout sensor wire using side cutters. Step 13. Loosen the timing belt pulleys using a 2mm hex wrench. Step 14. Remove the back diagonal braces using a 2.5mm hex wrench. The two M4 by 8mm button head screws securing the tops of the braces will no longer be used. Step 15. Remove the top brackets using a 3mm hex wrench. Neither the original brackets or the additional front brace brackets will be used again. Reinstall the screws to ensure the top extrusion doesn't fall. Step 16. Remove the Z-axis timing belt and pulleys. These will no longer be needed. Step 17. Loosen the upper screws in the lead screw couplers using a 2.5mm hex wrench. You might need to rotate the lead screws to access the screws. Ensure the gantry doesn't apply any force to the gantry support objects. Step 18. Remove the lead screws. You might need to hold the lead screw brackets to ensure only the lead screws are moving. Since the lead screws will be covered in grease, you might find paper towels helpful. The lead screws will no longer be used. Step 19. Remove the lead screw couplers using a 2.5mm hex wrench. The couplers will no longer be used. Step 20. Position the bed at the front of the printer, making sure the gantry doesn't fall down. Now is a good time to verify smooth up and down movement of the gantry, but ensure the linear rail carriages do not come off the rails. Step 21. Cut the motor zip tie using side cutters. Step 22. Disconnect the Z-axis motor cables. These connectors can sometimes be very difficult to remove. Be very careful to ensure you do not damage the cables, connectors, or the motors. Step 23. Remove the Z-axis motors using a 2.5mm hex wrench. The screws will no longer be used. Step 24. Remove the lead screw brackets using a 2.5mm hex wrench. The brackets will no longer be used. Step 25. Remove the motor mounts using a 2mm hex wrench. The mounts, screws, and wire tie down will no longer be used. Step 26. Loosen the T-nuts and wing nuts in the belt tensioners. A 2.5mm hex wrench might be helpful. Step 27. Install the belt tensioners using 4 M4 by 16mm button head screws and a 2.5mm hex wrench. Start by lightly tightening the top screws, and then lightly tightening the bottom screws. Next, remove a top screw and verify the T-nut rotated when being tightened. A flashlight might be helpful. Reinstall the top screw and then verify the other T-nut. Fully tighten the T-nuts. Step 28. Install the new motor mount brackets using a 3mm hex wrench. Keep the brackets loose to make inserting the axle easier in the next steps. Step 29. Insert the axle into one of the motor mount brackets. Be careful to keep the axle straight. Step 30. Install a long spacer. Step 31. Install a black belt pulley, making sure the teeth are pointing out. Step 32. Install an axle bearing, making sure the flange is towards the middle of the printer. Step 33. Push the axle past the spool holder. Step 34. Install the second axle bearing. Step 35. Install the second black belt pulley. Step 36. Install the second long spacer. Step 37. Fully install the axle. Step 38. Tighten the top brackets using a 3mm hex wrench. Step 39. Mount the Z-axis motors using 8 M3 by 6mm screws and a 2.5mm hex wrench. Make sure the connectors are facing towards the back of the printer. Step 40. Test the small pulleys to ensure the set screws are not in the way. Use a 2mm hex wrench to loosen the set screws if they are too tight. If there are any small burrs inside the pulleys, use a small round needle file to remove them. Step 41. Install a small spacer on each end of the axle. Step 42. Install the pulley assemblies. Each assembly consists of one large pulley, one small pulley, and one small timing belt. Ensure the teeth on the small pulleys are facing out and the teeth on the large pulleys are facing in. If everything is properly aligned, No force will be needed to install the assemblies. Step 43. Center the axle using a ruler. Approximately 6 millimeters of axle should be sticking out on each side. Step 44. Tighten the pulley assemblies. Slowly rotate the pulleys and watch the belt to make sure everything is straight and the belt is not rubbing against the sides of the pulleys. Tighten the set screws with a 2 millimeter hex wrench. Step 45. Position the filament runout sensor and LED cables by lightly pulling on the cables from the top and pushing from the bottom. Do not use force and be careful to not damage the cables. Enough slack should be pulled from the top so the cables at the bottom look like this. Step 46. Route the new Z-axis timing belts through the top brackets. Start by moving the pulleys out of the way and then feeding the belt through the hole in the bracket with the belt teeth facing down. A 2 millimeter hex wrench might be helpful for grabbing the belt. The belt must go in between the filament runout sensor and LED cables, with the filament runout sensor cable being closer to the front of the printer and the LED cable being closer to the back. With the belt in position, move the pulley to under the belt. Repeat for the second belt. Step 47. Install the bearing supports. Be careful to not bend the axle. Make sure the filament runout sensor wire is below the plastic support. Step 48. Position the filament runout sensor cable so it is flush against the extrusion. Pull any excess wire towards the sensor and push the plastic cover towards the spool holder to lock the cable into place. Step 49. Zip tie the LED cable to the top bracket, ensuring the wires and connector are clear of the belt. Use side cutters to trim to length. Step 50. Route Z-axis belts through the tensioners. A 2 millimeter hex wrench might be helpful for pulling the ends of the belt. Step 51. Rotate the right black pulley so both set screws are easily accessible. Step 52. Attach the right Z-axis belt to the gantry bracket. Ensure the set screws on the black pulley are still accessible. Step 53. Ensure the right Z-axis belt is straight. Step 54. Tighten the right Z-axis belt. Step 55. Tighten the right black pulley by using a 2 millimeter hex wrench. Do not apply any force to the axle. Step 56. Replace the gantry support objects with the gantry alignment guides. Slowly lower the gantry until it is resting on the guides. Step 57. Attach the left Z-axis belt Step 58. Rotate the left black pulley so the set screws are accessible. You might need to pinch and push up on the belt slightly to be able to move the pulley without moving the gantry. Step 59. Ensure the left Z-axis belt is straight. Step 60. Tighten the left Z-axis belt. Step 61. Tighten the left black pulley. Ensure no force is applied to the axle and that the gantry is not being lifted. Step 62. Remove the alignment guides. Step 63. Identify the left and right motor extension cables. When installing these cables, you need to be careful to install them on the correct sides. Otherwise, the gantry might start moving down when it's supposed to be going up, and moving up when it's supposed to be going down. While the cables should come with left and right stickers on them, they can also be identified by looking at the connectors. With the contacts in the female connectors facing up and the cables lying flat, the contacts in the left cable's male connector will be visible, while they will not be visible in the male connector on the right cable. Step 64. Feed the motor extension cables through the gantry. When looking at the front of the printer, install the right extension cable onto the right and the left cable onto the left. If the motor extension cables are not installed correctly, the movement of the gantry might be backwards. Step 65. Connect the smaller female ends of the motor extension cables to the motors. Step 66. Reattach the back diagonal braces using a 2.5mm hex wrench, a 7mm socket, 2 M4 by 12mm button head screws, 2 M4 nylon lock nuts, and previously removed fender washers and M4 by 20mm button head screws. Inserting both screws prior to tightening the lock nuts may be helpful. Step 67. Zip tie the motor extension cables to the top holes in the upper brackets. Use side cutters to trim to length. Step 68. Connect the larger male ends of the motor extension cables to the existing motor cables. Step 69. Install the 2 plastic wire guards, making sure the cables are not twisted or touching any moving parts. Adjust the slack at the top so the cables lie neatly against the printer frame and are clear of the pulleys. Step 70. Cut the existing zip tie on the right side of the printer's base using side cutters. Step 71. Feed the motor extension cable slack through the hole in the printer's base. Step 72. Secure the motor extension cable with a zip tie. using side cutters to trim to length. Step 73. Cut the existing zip tie on the left side of the printer's base using side cutters. Step 74. Feed the motor extension cable slack through the hole in the printer's base. Step 75. Zip tie the motor extension, filament runout sensor, and LED cables to the outer side of the belt tensioner. Ensure all cables are clear of the belt. Step 76. Secure the 3 cables to the printer's base with a zip tie. Trimming to length with side cutters. Step 77. Reconnect the printer's main cable. The cable mount will be installed shortly. Step 78. Install 2 small zip ties in the main cable mount, ensuring the ends of the zip ties are on the outside of the mount. Step 79. Install the cable mount using 3 M3 by 6mm socket head screws and a 2.5mm hex wrench. If you use a different cable mount, the number and types of screws might change. Step 80. Secure the main cable to the cable mount by tightening the zip ties. Keep the zip ties loose enough so the cable can freely move. Step 81. Reinstall the PEI build surface. If necessary, very slowly raise the gantry just enough to install the build surface. Step 82. Reconnect Ethernet. Step 83. Reconnect power. Step 84. Reinstall the front diagonal braces using 4 previously removed M5 by 14mm button head screws, 4 previously removed M5 nylon locking nuts, a 3mm hex wrench, and an 8mm socket. The belted Z-mod is now fully installed. We modified a Neptune 4 Max in this video, but I previously modified a Neptune 3 Max, and except for the connection to the Neptune 4 Max's large auxiliary fan, the steps were identical. While a review of this mod's effects on printer performance will need to wait for a future video, one functional change is readily apparent. With lead screws, you couldn't, at least very easily, push the gantry up or down, although you could manually rotate the lead screws. This isn't a common need, and you could possibly throw your gantry out of square. However, with belts, it's much easier to reposition the gantry. You probably still want to avoid doing this, but it could be helpful if your gantry gets stuck. You quickly turn off the printer, and then homing after turning the printer back on could cause damage. There's a slight drawback to this, however. When installed on a Neptune 4 Max equipped with an auxiliary fan, the mod has a tendency to cause the gantry to very slowly fall down when the motors are not powered. This doesn't happen all the time, but when it does, it seems to take around 20 minutes to an hour. I haven't fully timed it. Luckily, the 3D printed alignment guide blocks we used during the install were great for preventing the nozzle from touching the build surface. While a full review of this mod will need to wait, I did make a quick test print of a 20mm diameter, 100mm long cylinder, and the layers came out very consistent and even. The belted Z mod can take a few hours to install and includes a lot of steps, but individually, each step is relatively straightforward. However, if you do encounter any issues, let us know in the comments below, and I'll do my best to help you out. If you found this video helpful, and you'd like to see more videos in the future, make sure to like and subscribe, because as a small channel, it really helps us out. Also, if you'd like to be a super supporter of us or Bed Leveler 5000, come join us over at Patreon. Thanks for watching.